The storm had rolled in without warning. Thick clouds hung heavy over the open land, and the wind howled through the trees that lined the edge of my ranch. Rain lashed against the windows, steady and unforgiving. I'd just finished tying down the last of the tarp over the feed barrels when I saw him. A lone figure in the distance, stumbling down the muddy dirt road like a shadow lost in the dark. He didn't look dangerous, just cold and exhausted. His coat clung to his frame, drenched and sagging, and his shoes sank with every step in the sodden ground. I hesitated, gripping the porch rail, heart thrumming against my ribs. You don't last long on a ranch being soft. But something about him, maybe the way he kept glancing back over his shoulder, made me move. I met him halfway down the I drive. His eyes were glassy with rain and something else. Weariness, maybe, or fear. You okay? I asked. He nodded quickly, then shook his head. I didn't mean to trespass. I needed to get out of the storm. I'll leave as soon as it clears. I took a breath, studied him. Young, probably early 20s, cheekbones, sharp beneath his soaked curls, lips trembling from the cold. Come on, I said finally. I've got a fire going. You'll catch your death out here. Inside, I handed him a towel and a spare flannel. He changed in the bathroom while I set a pot of coffee on the stove. When he came out, he looked smaller in my clothes, like the world had knocked him down a few sizes. He mumbled a thanks and stood awkwardly by the fireplace, hands outstretched to the warmth. I'm Luca, he said after a while, voice barely above the crackling logs. James, I replied. This your first time out this way? He shrugged. Just passing through. Didn't plan to stop. Silence settled between us, not uncomfortable, just thick with the kind of questions neither of us knew how to ask yet. I watched the way his eyes traced the worn floorboards, the photos on the mantel, the rain running down the windows like rivers on glass. He noticed everything, like someone always scanning for the exit. I offered him a bowl of leftover stew and some bread. He ate quietly, not like he was starving, but like food was something he hadn't let himself enjoy in a while. I didn't pry. I knew what it was to carry silence like a shield. By the time the rain eased, night had fallen. I showed him the guest room, simple but clean. He lingered in the doorway, unsure. You can stay the night, I told him. No rush. He nodded, eyes flickering with something unreadable. Thanks. I lay awake longer than usual, listening to the creaks of the old house, the slow drip of rain from the gutters. There was a stranger under my roof, but it didn't feel wrong. Odd, maybe. Unexpected. But not wrong. In the days that followed, he stayed, helped me with the horses, fixed the hinge on the barn door without me asking. He didn't say much, but his silence wasn't cold. It was the kind that wrapped around you, careful, deliberate, like he was trying not to take up too much space. I started waiting for him in small ways, holding off dinner until he came in from the fields, pausing, chores so we could walk the fence line together. The ranch, which had long felt too big and too quiet, began to breathe again. But even in the warmth of those quiet moments, something about Luca stayed closed. He flinched at sudden sounds, kept his phone off. And once, when I came in early, from the stables, I found him staring out the back door, frozen like a man expecting ghosts. He smiled when he saw me, but it didn't reach his eyes. I smiled back, but a whisper of unease curled in my gut. Still, I told myself, he just needed time. After all, I'd taken him in from the storm. And already, he'd begun to feel like part of the land itself. I didn't know then that not every storm passes. Some only pause, waiting. Luca settled into life on the ranch like he'd always belonged there. Days bled into each other in a gentle rhythm. Early mornings with dew still fresh on the grass, midday sun catching in the horses' manes, and quiet. evenings with nothing but the sound of wind and fire. He moved through it all with a kind of quiet grace, never asking for more than he was given, but always giving just enough of himself to feel present. We didn't talk much about before. Whatever storm had chased him to my doorstep, he kept locked behind his eyes. But his actions spoke louder than any backstory ever could. He worked hard, never complained, and slowly, without fanfare, began carving out a space in the routines I thought were mine alone. He found comfort in small things, picking wildflowers near the fence line, feeding the calves in the early morning mist, watching the sun go down from the porch, a worn blanket around his shoulders. Sometimes I'd sit beside him, the silence between us as soft as the sky turning orange. One night, while we were brushing down the horses, he turned to me and said, "I haven't felt this still in years." I didn't press him, didn't ask what that meant. Instead, I handed him a fresh rag and said, "Stillness can be good. Sometimes it's the only way to heal." He gave a small smile and went back to his work. But I saw the way his fingers lingered against the horse's neck, like he was anchoring himself to something solid. Over time, our unspoken bond deepened. We moved in tandem, passing tools without needing to ask, sharing meals without needing to speak. I found myself listening for his footsteps on the porch, watching for his shape in the barn. And in the rare moments, he laughed. Really laughed. It felt like sunlight breaking through clouds I hadn't noticed gathering. One evening, a thunderstorm rolled through. We stayed inside, the wind howling and the lights flickering. I made us tea, and we sat on the worn couch, shoulder to shoulder, watching the rain streak across the windows. He rested his head back against the cushion and sighed. "My mom used to say storms were just the sky crying itself clean," he murmured. "That sounds like something a poet would say," I replied. "She was," he said, eyes distant. "Until she wasn't." The pain in his voice was quiet, but it filled the room. I didn't respond. I just placed my hand over his, and he didn't pull away. In the dim glow of the fireplace, it was easy to pretend the world outside didn't exist. Easy to believe that whatever had haunted him was gone now, washed away by the storm and buried in the soft soil of the ranch. But soon, cracks began to form in the calm we'd built. Luca grew distant in strange moments. He'd disappear for hours without a word, return with vague excuses about walking or clearing his head. He started taking calls outside, always ending them with clipped tones and glances over his shoulder. I caught him once, arguing with someone, in a hushed voice behind the barn. He saw me watching and quickly ended the call, saying it was nothing. I wanted to believe him. God, I tried. But there was a new tension in him, like a taut wire ready to snap. The ease between us faded, replaced by something murky and uncertain. He smiled less, avoided eye contact. And when I reached for him, his hand hesitated before taking mine. That night, I sat alone on the porch, listening to the wind rustle through the trees. The scent of rain lingered in the air, and the moonlight cast long, lonely shadows across the fields. Inside, Luca had gone to bed early, claiming he was tired. But I'd seen the look in his eyes, unrested, distracted, distant. I told myself it was just a phase, that whatever weighed on him would pass, like every storm does. But somewhere deep in my chest, doubt began to whisper. Quiet, persistent. Something had changed, and for the first time since he arrived, I wasn't sure he was still mine to trust. The unease didn't fade. It grew roots. Quiet, gnawing roots that twisted deeper each day. Luca still did the chores, still helped with the horses, still sat across from me at dinner. But the silences between us had changed. They used to feel full, like shared understanding. Now, they felt hollow, like he was somewhere else entirely, and I was just a ghost passing through his day. One morning, I found my spare truck keys missing. They turned up a day later, sitting neatly on the kitchen counter, but I hadn't moved them. When I asked Luca, he shrugged. Maybe you misplaced them. I wanted to believe him, but that same night, I found fresh tire tracks leading out, past the old cattle gate. Tracks too recent to be mine. I started watching him more closely. Not out of suspicion, not at first. More like trying to hold on to someone slipping away. He'd rise early, sometimes before dawn, and take long walks. Down the trail behind the barn, I followed once, careful not to be seen. I expected him to just be walking, maybe needing time alone. But instead I found him crouched behind the tool shed, whispering into his phone. The words were muffled, but the urgency in his voice was unmistakable. He wasn't calling a friend. He was coordinating, planning. He ended the call, turned, and walked straight past where I stood hidden behind a line of trees. For a moment, I thought he'd seen me. His eyes scanned the trees like he felt my breath on the wind, but he said nothing and went back inside like nothing had happened. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, while Luca's footsteps creaked across the floor above me. Something was unraveling, something I couldn't name yet. I thought of every smile he'd given me, every quiet moment we'd shared, and wondered which parts were real, which parts he'd rehearsed. The next day, I asked him directly. "You've been acting strange," I said over breakfast. "If there's something going on, I deserve to know." He looked up slowly, spoon halfway to his mouth. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't lie to me, Luca." His jaw tightened. For a second, I thought he might come clean. Instead, he pushed his bowl away and stood. "I'm going to check on the horses." He didn't look back. Later that evening, I found a stranger on my land. A tall man in a dark jacket standing behind the barn near the fence. He was lean, sharp-eyed, and clearly not from around here. When he saw me approaching, he stepped back quickly, fading into the woods without a word. I didn't chase him. I just turned around and walked inside, heart thudding in my chest like a war drum. My hands trembled as I reached for the doorframe. I stood there for a long time, just breathing, trying to figure out where the truth had started to rot. Luca came in hours later, his clothes dusted with hay, his face unreadable. "Someone was on our property," I said. His expression didn't change. "Probably a drifter." "You know him?" "No." I wanted to believe that, but everything in his stillness told me not to. That night, I sat on the couch, staring into the fire, while Luca moved around the house behind me. I didn't speak. I didn't look at him. I just watched the flames dance and thought about how warmth can sometimes be a warning. It wasn't just that he had secrets. It was that he didn't trust me enough to share them. He had taken shelter. In my home, in my arms. And now he was sneaking around like the walls themselves might turn against him. The truth was no longer hiding. It was crouching right beside me, whispering that something was coming. Something I hadn't prepared for. I didn't know what Luca was running from, or running toward. But I could feel it now. The storm wasn't over. It had only just begun. The truth came crashing in on a Tuesday. The morning was quiet, almost deceptively so. The air held a thick stillness that made the birds fall silent, and even the horses seemed restless. I was mending the eastern fence when I saw them. 2 black SUVs kicking up dust on the main road, moving too fast for ranch traffic. I didn't have time to think. By the time I reached the porch, the vehicles had stopped, and men in plain clothes poured out. They didn't knock. They didn't speak. They only flashed badges and asked a single question. "Where is Luca Moretti?" I froze. "Why?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He's a person of interest in an ongoing federal investigation, one of them replied. We have reason to believe he's here. I swallowed hard. Every piece of the last few weeks locked into place. The missing keys, the secret phone calls, the man behind the barn. Luca hadn't just been hiding from his past. He was running from justice. I didn't lie. I pointed toward the stable where I'd last seen him an hour before. The agents moved quickly, efficiently. They found him in the hayloft, sitting cross-legged with his back against the wall, as if he'd been waiting for them. He didn't resist. He didn't even speak. Just stood and let them cuff his wrists behind his back. As they led him past, his eyes met mine, soft, unreadable, full of something like sorrow. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said quietly. I couldn't respond. My throat closed around the words I didn't know how to say. After they left, the house felt different. The warmth had gone with him. All that remained were echoes of laughter that had once felt honest, of touches that had seemed real, of a boy who'd walked into my storm and made me believe he was looking for shelter, not hiding from a reckoning. I didn't know what crimes he'd committed. The agents didn't offer details, and I didn't ask. All I knew was that the man who had shared my home, my silence, my trust, had also built a life of lies just beneath the surface. For days, I walked the ranch in a fog, retracing the spaces we'd shared. The fence line where we talked about stillness, the tool shed where he'd whispered secrets into the wind, the couch where he'd leaned against me like it meant something. And maybe it did. Maybe that was the hardest part, not knowing what had been real. I thought about the moment I first saw him, soaked and shivering, framed by rain and desperation. I'd welcomed him in because something in me had hoped he'd be different. And for a while, he was. But you can't outrun the truth. It waits, patient and merciless. A week later, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name in his careful handwriting. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity outweighed anger. It was short. James, you didn't deserve to be part of my mess. But for what it's worth, what we had here, it was the only real thing I've known in years. I'm sorry for lying. I'm not sorry for meeting you. You gave me peace, even if it was borrowed. I folded the letter and set it on the mantel. I didn't know if I'd ever see him again, didn't know if I wanted to. But I did know something had changed in me. I had offered shelter, not just from the rain, but from the weight of the world. And in return, I'd been left with silence and betrayal, but also with memories, complex, sharp-edged, and real in a way few things ever are. The rains came again the following weekend. I stood on the porch, watching the storm roll over the land like a great gray wave. The air was thick with electricity, with memory. And though I was alone now, I didn't feel hollow. Some storms come to destroy, others to cleanse. This one I knew had done